There we go. Hi, everybody. Okay. Welcome to my Sunday live. Okay, this live is going to be a little different from my typical Sunday lives, which talk all about um, moving to El Salvador and living in El Salvador and what it's like to move here and to live in El Salvador. But this is going to be a little different. I'm taking a little detour because it's something that I truly believe in. I have a little bit of experience with, and because it's really important right now, because it's happening right now. So we are going to talk about the current negotiations with the United States and nuclear energy. So let's get started. First of all, mucho gusto. I am Jenny Ari, La Gringa Salvadoreña. I work for Living Like a Local, which is one of the first relocation and hosting companies in El Salvador. That is for people that want to move to El Salvador. There was lots of relocation and immigration companies for going out of El Salvador before 2021, but we were one of the first ones to come up to invite and help people come to El Salvador. So, and that is why this channel is based on that, what it's like to live as an expat in El Salvador. Now, in my, I guess I could say almost 9 months ago or so, in my TikTok channel, which actually is in Spanish, and that's more directed towards Salvadorans, where this is typically more for foreigners. I did a video on Chernobyl's anniversary about how this is the anniversary of Chernobyl, the biggest nuclear disaster ever. And I'm going to explain 4 reasons why nuclear is an awesome, great option for the future of El Salvador. Hi, Nina. And then I went through and I explained those things because, number one, in my past life, you could say, back when I was in my 20s, I went to school and I got my degree in chemical engineering, and actually from Florida State University with a minor in Spanish. And actually, my focus in my engineering program was nuclear. And just because I love the magic of things happening that you can't see. So, in fact, when I graduated from Florida State, I actually interviewed with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or the NRC. And they are the group in Washington that go around and monitor the nuclear plants that are in the United States in order to make sure, they're following the guidelines and they're keeping everything in line, and there's no funny stuff going on. So they were, I think, my first interview in my senior year, because that was my big goal. I totally wanted to work. I totally wanted to work with them. And if I couldn't work with them, then I had the option. I was thinking about I had my eye on the nuclear plant that is in Florida, on the eastern side of Florida. There's a nuclear plant in the northeastern part of Florida that I was eyeing and thinking about working at, because, hello, my family is from Florida. So, my life took a great big turn in that I totally blanked during my NRC interview. It was honestly an act of God because I was so ready and so pumped for that interview, and then I got in there and it was nothing. I was like, bah, 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 bah. Yeah. And a month later, my boyfriend proposed, and we ended up getting married and having to move to the other side of the country. So God kind of knew what he was doing when, he totally blanked me out during that interview. But in the process, though, of getting that education and understanding all about nuclear, I want to explain a little bit about why nuclear is great for El Salvador. Now, granted, this was a good, 20 years ago. And even in my classes that had all these other chemical engineers that ended up going and working for natural gas plants, they ended up working for solar companies. They ended up working for all these other even in our classes, we went in and we really studied all the different types of energy production, how energy is produced, and that's kind of something that that most of us don't really get into because we think it's all complicated, but it's not really. It really comes down to the majority of energy production, whether it's oil, gas, wind, let's see, hydroelectric, all these different, even geothermal. I think the only one that doesn't use this process would be solar, um, because what happens is you heat up water, or, well, with the hydroelectric, you just use running water, but you move a turbine. Okay. A turbine is it's like a shaft with a whole lot of little, let's see, little pedals around it. So you either push water in there or you put high pressure steam in there, and it will push and turn that looks like a water wheel, but it's a turbine around and around and around. And then basically, now this is super, super basic. Don't don't go to, an energy, expert and say, well, Jen said, I'm toning this down a ton. Okay, basically what happens, you have massive magnets, you have wires wrapped around it, and as that turbine turns, as you move things around magnetic fields, you produce electricity. And the electricity starts going through those wires and starts heading out. So that's how electricity is made in a very, very basic kind of explanation, you could say. So what happens with nuclear, and the reason why nuclear is so much more the advantage than, say, all these other ways of doing the same thing, spinning a turbine, which is pretty much what they're trying to do, is because nuclear, it's how what you're using to spin that turbine. Hydroelectric is really limited by location. There's only so many rivers. I mean, now the Rio Lempa has like 4 hydroelectric plants. But hello, you can't put a hydroelectric plant anywhere you want. It has to have the geography, it has to have the topography. And so that's very limited in where you can put it. Number 2 is like geothermal. Geothermal, we have in El Salvador, there's currently La Geo, or it's La Geo, actually has 2 geothermal plants in El Salvador. I mean, hello, we got 100 volcanoes. Why not use them? So we have geothermal plants. One I know is around Berlin, and the other one, I've seen the other one when I was driving across the country because I saw it off in the distance. I'm like, oh, check it out. There's the other geothermal plant. But I don't know exactly exactly where it's at. But geothermal, again, it's great. You take the hot steam, and you take coming out of that is close to the lava, and so you get that hot steam that's coming out from the earth. You capture it, you put it in there, you get it turned in those turbines. Boom, you get electricity. Again, though, you are very limited in where you can put a geothermal. And geothermals are not necessarily very efficient in that the steam coming out isn't as superheated, you could say, like we have in nuclear. Okay. So the steam's got to be really hot, because if we have to heat it up, then we're using energy to heat it up, and it's like, what's the point? So you have to go to places where it's really thin, where the magma is really close and the lava is really close, and you've got a really good vent. And again, that's a limiting factor. So you can't just say, oh, let's just go pop a geothermal plant on every single volcano. No, that's not necessarily going to work. Next, we could say with wind, with the wind and the windmills that they put out. Again, you can't put it anywhere. You've got to go to some place that's got a really good steady wind. That happens all the time. And again, that is location dependent. very few places you can put that that's going to be reliable, that's going to be worth the investment, and it's going to produce the kilowatt hours. Plus, that's not that great for the environment if we're being real. Have you ever walked underneath one of those windmills? It's like, it's bird graveyard. It's massive for killing a lot of wildlife. So, hi there, Brian. Pull up a good old Ricardo Montalban. Oh, thanks. And so, okay, so let's move on. Now, right now, El Salvador actually has a really good energy kind of portfolio, you could say, because 60% of El Salvador's energy comes from renewables. We've got, in fact, just to look up the right numbers, we get 21% from hydroelectric dams, we get 20% from the geothermals, and we get 14% from solar, and then we get another like 6 from biofuels and wind. The other 40% comes from natural gas, oil, non-renewables, things that you burn up and you can't get back. So the thing is, I mean, we really have a pretty good portfolio as far as when it comes to like pollution and things like that. But what nuclear is going to do is it's going to blow it out of the water. If you look at the comparison between kilowatt hours that you can get from each of these different sources, nuclear is just huge. I mean, for example, in Latin America, there's 2 nuclear plants in Mexico, there's 2 in Brazil, and I think there's 3 in Argentina. And just for example, in the Mexico plant where it operates, it gives energy. Oh, shoot. I'm not going to say the number, but because then you guys will call me and say, no, you're wrong, Jen, you said this. But if you look it up, it gives out so many kilowatt hours. And a nuclear plant has a lifespan, a massively long lifespan, as opposed to some of the other things that, well, they'll work for maybe 10, 20 years. A nuclear plant can work for like up to 50 years. That it is fully functional as long as it stays regulated. Okay, let's talk about, so that's what it's going to do for El Salvador as far as taking and providing a whole lot more energy onto the grid. And then the other big thing is in El Salvador, well, when it comes down to it, you guys know water is cheap. The water in El Salvador is really cheap. I mean, our bills are like 6, they'll range from 6 to maybe on a heavy month, $15. That's it. But electricity, that's your limiting factor. That's why when I first came down here, I was like, well, where's the central ACs? Why isn't there vents in like every single room? What's going on? There's this little wall unit, and it's not even like the units we have in the US where, oh, you put it in a window and you got this box sitting outside of the window, right? No. The ACs down here, it's this long rectangular thing that sits high on the wall, and then what happens is you have to put an outdoor compressor outside. Whereas in like a central AC, you'll have your train AC unit outside on the ground. Well, they make little like mini versions of that, and they'll put it right outside of where they have this long triangular indoor unit. And that's why in El Salvador, it's per room. Every unit is separate, and you have one in the bedrooms. That's typically where people put them, is in the bedrooms. You don't really have central AC unless you're talking about some big massive building. Okay, interesting topic. The question is El Salvador ready? Good point. So when it comes to electricity, as I was saying, you guys know to have an electricity bill of $80, even $100 in the summertime, it's all about it can totally happen. It can totally be typical. And you are really on, at least I am always really on my husband saying, are you using the AC right now? And we turn it off all the time, unless it's like we really need this. We're leaving. You make sure you turn. And I know among Superhost and other Airbnb people, they get ticked. They get ticked at at the foreigners that come and just leave the AC running because they're used to central ACs where it's kind of monitored themselves, and they just don't think about it. But I'm telling you, yeah, but no, it's a big thing. It is your biggest bill in El Salvador. So to have double the amount of energy available is going to massively impact our electricity prices. Now, that plus the other big thing is y'all know, Pulgarcito, we're little, there's not a whole lot of things we can export. But with a nuclear plant in there, we could export electricity to Honduras, to Nica, to Guatemala, heck, probably even to Belize, but to all of our neighbors. And that could possibly become a great source of revenue for El Salvador to export electricity. Just saying. Now, let's talk about I want to talk about some of the other things, and we'll get to your point, Tenestubo, about is El Salvador ready? Okay, because number one, okay, the advantage of the environment. Okay, and in the environment, okay, if you're burning stuff, burning the natural oil, burning natural gas, you're going to have lots of pollution and lots of bad gases in the air. And I mean, that may not affect you very much unless you live in the capital, because I don't know about you guys, but I hate breathing when I'm walking around, Las Mercedes, something like that. The pollution is terrible from the cars. And yeah, it's no bueno. So having more plants that burn things and put more pollution in the air, that's really not the place to go. Now, I want to explain a little bit about what a nuclear plant is like, so you understand. Those big conical towers that you see? Those are actually cooling towers, and all that white smoke you see coming out the top, that's just steam. That's just water vapor. That's not smoke. That's not pollution that's going up there. Because how it works is, well, here, let's get to how it works. What happens is you have a reaction. You have a nuclear fission reaction, which is typically where they go in and they're splitting an atom. Okay. Now, when you split an atom, especially certain atoms, it releases a whole lot of energy, a whole lot of energy. And that energy is in the form of heat. So what happens is when they create this reaction, the reaction starts going. And as the reaction going, the heat is coming off. And they pump water right next to, it's called in the reactor. They pump water around it. The water comes in there. It almost instantaneously becomes superheated steam. Now there's steam, steam is about 100 Celsius. Superheated steam is when you've got it pressurized and it's even hotter than 100 degrees Celsius. This superheated steam then goes into the turbine, and it pushes and it runs that turbine, and it pushes the turbine, and not just through the temperature and being so hot, but also from the pressurization. As the pressure goes down and as it cools, then it condenses, and it's a lot cooler steam, and then it goes off to condensers. And then the condensers, that water goes next to nice cold water in the other pipes. And that cold water then grabs the heat from that steam, and the steam condenses down into water droplets and then drips down, and then can be used to be sent back in to go around the reactor again, become superheated steam again, push the turbine again until it cools down. Then it goes back down to be transferred again to the water. Now, the water that gets the heat from the reactor water, you could say, is that water goes to the cooling towers. So that water is super, super hot water. It goes out to the cooling towers, and as soon as it's exposed to air, that's where you get those big white plumes of steam coming out of the top of those. And as that cools down, the water that is now below steam temperature and now is at ambient pressure or it's normal, you know, atmospheric pressure, then it needs to cool down even further. And so a lot of times you'll have these big, long cooling ponds. And those, I know from the Florida plant that I was investigating, those cooling ponds are actually great for the environment. So I think a great place to put this plant would be down in like Usulatan, where you have the estetuarios. What is that in English? We have like those marshes, like the mango marshes. I can't think of what the word is, but um, but anyway, um, for more power for development. Brian says the companies going to El Salvador, they requested more power for development. It's true. It's true. If we want to bring in tech companies, we need more electricity because they use a lot of electricity with a tech company because it's electronics, right? And so these cooling, okay. And that's another reason why, we need more energy in El Salvador. So anyway, back to these cooling ponds. The cooling ponds end up being great places for wildlife, and it's all protected area. And all the time, the water gets tested to make sure that it's a great, safe place for the wildlife to flourish. It is warmer than the typical temperature of the water, but that's kind of the point. The point is for that space for it to cool down even more so it's more like ambient temperature and ambient pressure. Since inside the reactor, it's at a high pressure and it's at a high temperature. So it's a slow kind of process to get it back down to normal and then to go down around the reactor again and just keep that turbine going, and then we get the energy pumping. Okay, so since that's how it works, it has that advantage on the environmental advantage of just it's good for the marshes and the places around there. Typically the places where they put nuclear reactor aren't places that people want to live. Think about it. Down in the marshes, usually people don't it's not a place where you put up a house, or like a beach house or something like that, because the land is not as like rock hard stable. You know what I'm talking about? It's a little bit more marshy. And so again, that's kind of an advantage as opposed to putting in a type of electrical plant that needs a whole lot of space in a place maybe that people would rather live. So there's the environmental advantages. Okay, the other thing I already told you was the cost. So the things we have to pay for is you have to pay for the chemicals that are reacting. And typically they controlled the reaction by putting in, this is way back in the day when they used uranium. Uranium is one of the best things to use because it puts off some of the most heat when you do fission. But the problem with uranium is the byproducts, the spent rods afterwards. Those are severely radioactive, and that's kind of what you can make some atomic bombs from. So that was the whole reason why it was so, poo-poo, no, what do we do with these things? They're dangerous. What if they get in the wrong hands? And that's why back when I was in school, even though everybody in class and even the professors and anyone with knowledge knew, okay, nuclear is the best as far as output versus input and all the other factors. But there was so much fear, and there was so much public kind of angst against nuclear that that's like, well, it doesn't matter if this is the most efficient, best way to do it. The public won't do it. So, oh well, we had to go back to burning coal and burning stuff and putting lots of junk in the atmosphere. So, but either way, but the big thing is they have changed a lot. Just like any technology, the very first car that came out, oh my goodness, was crashing every other day. Chernobyl happened at the very, very beginning of nuclear technology. And that's part of the reason why when it went bad, it went really bad. And I think that, but nuclear technology has changed so massively. And in fact, my son, apple doesn't fall that far from the tree. My son was actually going to go into nuclear too. And he wanted to work at Idaho National Laboratories. I don't know if you guys know about this, but Idaho National Laboratories is where they've done tons of research, tons of development. And they've even created these small mini nuclear reactors, small mini plants, because some of these big factories and stuff, they don't want to pull energy off the grid. They need to make their own energy. And so some of these small little reactors have been placed in plants. And so they make their own energy because instead of a big, massive, plant that can take, I know there's one here in Georgia that's been in construction for over like 10, 15 years. It's crazy. It's so massive. It's so big. It can take forever just to get the thing online. And so now they're starting to make these smaller ones. And the other big thing is they're not using uranium anymore. Hello, how do we solve this? Okay, yeah, it's a great chemical, but it has the most output, but it's really, really dangerous. So now they're using, I think China even started the first thorium plant. And thorium plant is not nearly as dangerous. The byproducts, I should say, are not nearly as dangerous as uranium because there's a whole lot of hubbub because they're putting the spent rods in a mountain in Nevada, and it had to be on a big, tight lockdown, and everybody was really scared. Nobody wanted to live anywhere remotely close to the mountain, and it was just, yeah, it was a lot of like, okay, maybe we should put this to the side and do something else for a while until we can get the technology up to par. Now, Fukushima, that's something that really applies to El Salvador. And that's what a lot of people in El Salvador are worried about. Because what happened in Fukushima, they had an earthquake. El Salvador, hello, we get wiggles and wobbles all the time. So this is a very valid concern for Salvadorans. Like, they had an earthquake, and then about an hour later, a big tsunami tidal wave came in and crashed over the plant. And it was, yeah, and they had a meltdown, and it was not good. No bueno, para nada. And that is a very valid concern in the fact that we get earthquakes all the time. And we could have a tsunami. We have, I don't know, when's the last time? Do you guys know when's the last time that there was a tsunami that actually hit El Salvador? Type it in the comments if you do know. Oh, hi, Elmer. Sorry, I'll catch up on my comments. Thank you for getting the info. It's very important. No problem, Brian. Oh, hi, Elmer. Nice to meet you. By now, I hope change the way it works. Well, that's just it. That's what I'm saying. In Idaho National Laboratories, they've shown all these new little mini plants, so you don't necessarily need a ton of reactors. And they've also using different chemicals, so using thorium instead of uranium, which is again much safer. And so the technology has advanced a lot. And with the technology advancing, you also have massive security advances as far as safety systems and having check after check after check after check. And so that's the thing that I think my recommendation would be to the government, if like they listen to me, right? But is to make sure the earthquake systems, to make sure that there's ways that if we have a big, massive earthquake, that the reaction is shut down immediately. And to have safety backup systems for in the event of an earthquake or say a tsunami. Because if a tsunami is coming, we should have at least enough. If the plant is not right on the coast, which I don't think El Salvador would put it right on the beachfront, because hello, that properties. That property's kind of filled up with tourists anyway. May not be the best place to put it. As I said, I'd put it right inside of a bay, somewhere like that. You have at least 5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes of warning before the tsunami hits, because there's always that major water recession where the water goes all the way back to the sea, right? And builds up before the tsunami comes in. And in that amount of time, having the security systems in place with that warning to shut the plant down before the tsunami hits. I think since it's been so long, it's been over 12 years since Fukushima, that they can put those safety systems in place, and even possibly putting the reactor, having some kind of balancing system underneath the reactor, so that even if there is, massive shaking and stuff, that the reactor is solid and will just shake together, but not break apart in any way, shape, or form. Because you can make things so that they just shake together instead of, I don't know how you'd say that, but I know there's ways. And California, I think California has nuclear reactors, and they have earthquakes too all the time. So El Salvador is smart enough to take from Fukushima, to take experts from Fukushima, to take experts from California, and now they have permission. The reason why they're doing deals with Trump is because we have to have, being the neighbor to a big, powerful country like the United States, we definitely have to have clearance and help in making sure that our nuclear operations are on the up and up, and they don't think we're doing something dangerous in their backyard. So sometimes, yes, it's better to ask for forgiveness, but sometimes it's way better to ask for permission. And Bukele is trying to be upfront and honest and transparent and saying, nope, I'm asking permission. I'm going through the right channels. I'm not going to do something in the back that I think is good, and without making sure everything's on the up and up. And that is a very wise decision, in my opinion. So I think I've covered just about everything that I wanted to cover. Yep. So that's it. If you guys have, so did you guys say, so Elmer says there's never been a tsunami to hit El Salvador. Let's see. As nuclear power, I can't remember any time they said that. Malida says she can't remember any time that we had a tsunami either. I think first we should invest in education related to nuclear energy. It's an enormous undertaking. That install a nuclear reactor, let alone give it maintenance. You know what? Teneste, I'm just going to call you Teneste. Teneste, yes, I'm big on investing in education, but honestly, it's going to take so long to create this reactor, and the amount of experts and people to actually run the reactor is not that high. So I wouldn't be sitting there and educating the entire country in chemical engineering and nuclear engineering for a plant that will probably employ maybe 200, 300 people. And the people that actually need to know about the reaction and the engineers that are actually involved in that, maybe a third of those employees will be the engineers that need to know that stuff. So I don't know that we really necessarily need the education for the reactor, I'd say. But I do think, yes, El Salvador, okay, my 2 cents on economic plan is the education system has to be overhauled massively. If we want to bring in these tech companies, we want to bring in foreign investors, then El Salvador needs really smart kids with a lot of abilities and a lot of skills. Because if we just have really good jobs here, we're going to have the same problems as the US. And all the Hondurans and all the Guatemalans are going to want to come in, and we'll have illegal immigration problems just like the US, because they're like, oh, well, we want to come in and get paid really great wages. Well, hello, the only way to not have similar problems as what they have is if Salvadorans, hello, we are living in a global world. And if Salvadorans have more skills on the global realm, have more skills, more abilities, they can do more to warrant being paid more, then you won't have the issue of, oh, hey, El Salvador is now the rich country in El Salvador in Central America, everybody flocking into us. Just because, oh, well, look, you're just from El Salvador, so you're just lucky and you just get all the great jobs. And yeah, no, the quality of the education has got to meet what we're trying to attract. Because it's a lot easier to attract bees with honey than with vinegar. Just saying. So let's see. Elmer says, a few years ago, President Bukele mentioned about we're going to have an English channel news, but I didn't see it yet. No, I know there is a news channel called El Salvador in English, but that's not like through the government. It's just a website, I think. The other thing is our government is working right now to keep our country safe. Thank you. You sound good. What would you say for an American that wants to move to ES? Go to our website. Melida, go to Living Like a Local's website. I have relocation tours. If you're thinking about ES and you want to try it out, come on a relocation tour with me, and I'll show you all the cultural shocks. I'll show you all the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful of El Salvador, so you can know for sure, yes to El Salvador or no to El Salvador. Because there's only so many YouTube videos you can watch. You need to get boots on the ground, and you need to come try it out for yourself. That's my number one recommendation, is come on a relocation tour, and we'll give you a deep dive into what it's like to live in El Salvador. This is not a tourism thing. We're not going to hike a volcano. You're not going to surf. No, you're going to get into real life day to day in El Salvador. That's my recommendation. And if you are ready to move down to El Salvador, look up Living Like a Local. We've got everything from a concierge service where we do it all for you. We take you by the hand and help you pick out your house, help you put furniture in it, get you your doctor, your school, your utilities, get everything all hooked up. So what would usually take you a year to get used to being in a country takes you about 6 weeks, because it helps to know some locals. So that's it for me. Whew, I'm already over time. So if you have any other questions, you can send them to info@livinglikealocal.com. And if you want to learn more about nuclear, don't call me. They do a whole lot of research and a whole lot of binging. I would definitely look up Idaho National Laboratory. They've got some great research going on there. I am Jenny Adi, shining my light so you can shine yours. And I hope this will give you a little bit more of an understanding of why President Bukele is doing this and how he thinks it is majorly going to benefit El Salvador, because he is El Salvador's president, not Bitcoin's, not anybody else's. And he's trying to truly advance the country. So, okay, you're watching the Super Bowl. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.